talk about how to price or value your venture. You're in the fundraising stage, week 3 of the 30-day founder blueprint. We've been talking about how to fundraise. We've talked about venture debt. We've talked about private equity. We've talked about what pitch decks will look like, all these different things. And let's just say, let's hope you get lucky and an investor says, I'm interested in investing in your startup. To do that on the venture equity side, not the venture debt side, but the venture equity side, you have to come up with some sort of valuation or what your venture is worth. How the heck do you do that? Especially when you're an early stage startup and you haven't accomplished a lot of things yet. The more milestones and traction you have, the easier it is to value your business. Traditional businesses, valuing them is relatively easy. You just take the revenue and you do a multiple of it, and that's what it's worth. So I make it sound a little easier than it really is, but essentially, if you're a revenue producing venture, it's easier to value what you're worth. If you're making, $1 million per year and you're in an industry that gets a multiple of that, so 2x, 3x, 5x, SaaS, 10, 20x, that type of thing, you just take the revenue times a number, and that's roughly what the business is going to be worth. It's no different really than when a publicly traded venture is valued. It's the stock price times the number of shares, right? That kind of thing. So it's not hard, but if you're a pre-revenue startup, how the heck do you do it? Well, there are ways to do it. Traction and things like this can be valued, but here's the real truth. You don't have to value your startup. There's 2 different ways I want you to think about this today. The first is that it's really on the investor to value your startup. You tell them what you're doing. You tell them the idea, the pain point you're solving, how you're going to solve it, all the different things you've accomplished. You tell them about your team. You tell them how much money you need to raise, and it's up to them to come up with the valuation. So it's really on them. You don't have to do it. Now, if, and I've seen this happen, you're trying to value it in some way, where most people get hung up on this topic is they think about Shark Tank. At the Shark Tank, they're always saying, I'm raising $100,000 in exchange for 10% equity. Well, that means they're valuing their venture at $1 million. Okay, that's how that math works out. So everyone thinks that's what you have to do. You don't. You don't have to put a value on an early stage startup when there's not much to value it on. What do you do instead? This is where something called convertible debt. You may have also heard them called SAFEs, Simple Agreement for Future Equities. Matter of fact, go to my YouTube channel. It's one of my most popular videos I have. I want to say there's 13 or 15,000 people who have watched it. And I talk about convertible debt, how it works, and SAFEs, how they work. SAFE is just the term that a very popular incubator, Y Combinator, gave to their type of convertible debt that they recommend. And so I'll cover it briefly for you here. You don't have to necessarily value your startup. Matter of fact, if not enough things have happened, it's best to kick or push the valuation to a later date. That's what a convertible note does. A convertible debt basically says that investor is going to give you money in the venture, but at this stage, it's too early and there's not enough things to value the business on. And so you push that valuation until the next time you raise money, hopefully when there's more things that have happened. Now, in exchange for that, you're having to give them a discount on that future valuation. So if you're pushing the valuation to later and you raise another round, what you may give them is a 10% discount on the valuation. That's how you incentivize an investor to invest in a convertible debt note or a convertible note. And they get a more favorable valuation than investors that come later on. So believe it or not, just going to say it again, you don't have to value your startup. You can just force the startup investor to tell you what they think it's worth, and then that math can be used to back into the equity they would get in exchange for the capital that you're going to give them. If you arbitrarily value it, an investor is going to read between that. So I've mentioned to you before that I used to do the due diligence for a very large angel syndicate, and we would see ask slides on pitch decks all the time that would say, I need $1 million and I'll give up 10% equity in my business. There are historical numbers that you can look at to get a sense of how much equity you tend to give up at the fundraising round that you're in. So when we see pre-seed, seed, it's usually 15 to 25% you'll give up in your venture. You can use those types of things, but again, using convertible notes really allows you to push that to a later date. You don't have to focus on it a whole lot. You can simply Google Y Combinator's SAFE agreement. If you want to see what it looks like, there's some covenants in there that that they do. One of it is the discount on the future rounds and things like liquidation preferences that I'm not going to go into today. So just to reiterate, you don't have to value the startup. It's on the investor to tell you what they think it's worth. But if there is some sort of need to value it on an early stage startup where it's ideation stage or there's no revenue, those types of things, I very much recommend looking into convertible note, looking into a simple agreement for future equity. It at least contracts you with the investor. You're getting the capital in, but instead of having to value it, you push it to a later date when there's a lot more going on. Hopefully you have users, hopefully you have revenue, things that make evaluation a whole lot easier. If you're trying to evaluate your business now, if it's too early, it's just going to be too difficult. Push it to a later date. Check out convertible notes. They work perfectly for that.